Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala abdillahi wa rasulihi nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to what I hope will be the last part of this Your Questions Answered as part of the questions we collected on the Sweden and Denmark tour, which took place at the end of November and the beginning of December last year. I have probably around 30-40 questions left to answer, inshallah. I can't say I answer every single question. There are one or two that might not be sort of appropriate or possible to answer on the video, but as many as we could, we tried to answer. And this is the third sitting that we've had to help to try to answer these questions. The question continues. My question is as follows. If people assume someone in your family has helped someone to do sihr, what should you do? You shouldn't cut family ties, but if it really shows that someone close to you in the family has done it, what can you do about it? And if some family members blame it on some people you know are practicing Muslims, is it the shaitan that is making them believe it or something else? So the first thing is that magic is a very, very, very serious thing to be involved in. And Allah said about it, وَلَقَدْ عَلِمُوا لَمَنِ اشْتَرَاهُ مَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَقٍ. You certainly know that anyone who purchases it, i.e. is involved in it, will not have any share in the hereafter at all. So with that being said, it is something extremely serious to accuse someone of. And the accusation in this regard will fall into two categories. Something that you are certain of, absolutely certain, or extremely confident in. And something that remains a guess, a suspicion, or a feeling. As for a guess or a suspicion or a feeling, you must not cut off from anyone. Take your precautions. وَخُذُوا حِذْرَكُمْ. Take your precautions, your adhkar. Maybe don't, for example, if the person cooks food for you, be careful, about eating it. There are precautions you can take. But in terms of actually accusing someone, saying, this person did sihr on me, that is a very, very severe accusation that you should be extremely certain of. Because at the end of the day, it's a matter that a person in an Islamic court would be executed for. So if you would feel confident for a person to lose their life because of it, then that is the level of confidence that you have to have in this kind of accusation. But taking precautions is no problem. Then on top of that, family members you cannot cut off from. You can't. But all you can do is change the way the relationship works. So instead of being in their house and you in theirs, maybe it's more of a little bit more distance involved, especially if there's a harm. And ultimately, repelling that harm does take precedence over bringing benefit. At the same time, the shaitan can trick people into thinking, and that's why you have these instant diagnoses that happen where somebody comes and says, who did it? It was your cousin. They meet the sheikh for 1 minute. They go into the room. Sheikh says, you have sihr done on you. You have 3 jinn. 1 jinn came from here, 1 from here, and it was your cousin. This is all from the shaitan. It's all akhbar shaitaniyah. It's all the news of the shaitan. So be very careful in believing in it, especially if you know them to be Muslims practicing upon the sunnah. Then I would be the furthest away from accusing someone of it. But you can take precautions. وَخُذُوا حِذْرَكُمْ. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. How do you enjoin good and forbid evil in a non-Islamic country like Sweden? Very simple. The rules of commanding good and forbidding evil don't change. The Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ رَأَى مِنْكُمْ مُنْكَرًا فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِقَلْبِهِ وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. Whoever of you sees an evil, let him change it with his hand. And changing with the hand is for those in authority. So you might have limited authority. For example, a father towards a child, what goes on in my own house, maybe what goes on in my masjid that I'm in charge of, that is in my authority, but I'm not a policeman, I'm not a member of the government or whatever it might be. There's certain things I can't do. I'm not a judge, but I do have physical authority to make changes in areas that belong to me, like my house and my masjid. The other thing is, if I can't have the authority, I may well be able to ask someone in authority. I don't like involving non-Muslim police in matters to do with the Muslims, but sometimes there isn't a choice if it's a matter which is very severe and the harm is very great, and there's no other way to fulfill the rights of a person except that, and the harm upon them would be very great, then yes, I could call someone in authority to deal with the issue. فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ. Then comes the tongue, and the tongue requires knowledge. So if the person has enough knowledge to be able to say that what's going on is wrong and explain why, to a certain extent, not the level of a scholar, but to be able to explain or to be able to communicate that this is wrong and this is the evidence for it being wrong, then with the tongue. And again, if you can't do that, you could invite someone. For example, you see something wrong in the masjid, you don't have the authority, you don't have the knowledge, but you can go to the imam and tell the imam to speak about it. He has the knowledge to do it. فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِقَلْبِهِ. And if not, then by the heart. وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. That is the weakest, the minimum standard of faith. But the heart, my brothers and sisters, a lot of people get confused about. A lot of people think that the heart is just a matter of hating it and nothing else. But it's not. If you hate something in your heart, it must show on your actions. ألا وإن في الجسد مضغة إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله ألا وهي القلب. Indeed, in the body there's a piece of flesh. If it is righteous, the whole body will be righteous, and if it's corrupt, the whole body will be corrupt. It's the heart. If you hate something in your heart, it has to show on your limbs. So if you are sitting with people who are doing evil and you can't stop them physically and you can't stop them verbally, but at least you can walk away. وَإِذَا رَأَيْتَ الَّذِينَ يَخُوضُونَ فِي آيَاتِنَا فَأَعْرِضْ عَنْهُمْ حَتَّى يَخُوضُوا فِي حَدِيثٍ غَيْرِهِ وَإِمَّا يُنْسِيَنَّكَ الشَّيْطَانُ فَلَا تَقْعُدْ بَعْدَ الذِّكْرَى مَعَ الْقَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ. If you see people getting involved in speaking without knowledge and making fun of our ayat, turn away from them until they speak about something different. So you can't fight them, and you're not able to verbally challenge them. فَأَعْرِضْ عَنْهُمْ. Turn away from them. You can walk away. And if the shaitan causes you to forget, don't sit after you remember with the wrongdoing people. And then the next question is, or the next part of this question is, that do not forbid evil in a way that makes it worse. So for example, if I am going to say to someone that this is wrong, and the situation, let's just give an example. Someone is let's say, I don't know, drinking alcohol or whatever, and I go up to them and I say something to, or I try to take it off them, or I say something to them, whatever I decide to do, and the situation gets so much worse that they report me to the authorities, because non-Muslim country, and they have the right to do what they did and I don't have the right to do what I did, and the end result is that, for example, the masjid gets closed, or the person forbidding that one evil gets put in jail for a year or something like that. Look at the negatives that came out. You didn't get any benefit. You didn't stop the person drinking. They can drink the same place tomorrow. You actually stopped your da'wah from happening, and you didn't stop the problem, and you did so in other words, you made the situation worse by trying to stop the problem. There could have been another way of dealing with it, maybe politely saying to the person that, as Muslims we don't drink, and you drinking here, it's a little bit it's not really appropriate, and I would really appreciate it. And maybe that type of thing could have worked better. But if you made the situation so bad that you ended up getting yourself arrested or prosecuted or punished, or even the masjid closed, or some big problem happening to the Muslims because you were trying to stop one person drinking alcohol, And you didn't even stop them doing it. Don't make the situation worse than the problem you're trying to solve. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. I have a current account that currently has 0% interest, but the bank sometimes raises it. I contact the bank and they say I can block my account from interest forever, but then they keep the interest money themselves. Should I give out the interest to people who need it? No, you should tell the bank exactly what you said to block it forever. You should not give it out to the poor or the needy. This money is rijs, it is filth. It doesn't deserve to be, even they say when you give riba to the poor, you're giving it min bab al-takhallus la min bab al-sadaqah. You're giving it just to get it out of your hands. It's like toxic, it's radioactive, just to get this dirty thing off of your hand. You're not even giving it sadaqah. When you take riba and give it to a poor person, it's not sadaqah. It's not sadaqah. When you take riba from your account and give it to a poor person, all you're doing is just throwing out the trash. That's it. You're throwing out the filth and the dirt and the infection. It's like you're taking an infected wound and you take the bandage from it and you throw it in the street. That's all you're doing when you give the riba from your account. It's not even sadaqah. So don't just tell the bank to block it. It's the bank's responsibility what they do with it. I'm a sister who's currently studying, doing an internship during my education, but I wear a niqab. Is it wrong? So what I understood from the question, is it wrong that I don't wear it during my internship? So there's no doubt that if we say that the niqab is fard, and that's my personal view, then it's not allowed to take it off for the internship or for any other reason. For any other reason. And I know the situation in different countries is very difficult. And I think maybe if you were to ask the question about your personal situation in the country you're in to one of your local mashayikh, I think they would be able to give you a more direct answer about what is and isn't possible, because I don't know the law. Does it allow you to wear it? Does it not allow you? Is there a way you can argue your right to wear it? Is there another job you could take where you could wear it? I'm not sure about that. But the principle is, if you believe something to be fard and you hold it to be fard, it's fard all the time. It's not fard but only when you don't have an internship or something like that. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. What are the steps for turning back to Allah? I think we've answered this also before, but I'll just briefly go over. The very first step is to feel regret over what you have done. Actually, before that, the very first step is to recognize you have a sin. To recognize your sin. And then to feel sorry for it. And then to stop doing it. And then to resolve not to do it again. And then if you have harmed or hurt somebody or taken their rights or their wealth, to give that back to them in the best way that you can. And if you can't do that, then at least to make dua for them until you feel you've paid back the harm that you did to them. And of course to beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness and to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for you and to replace the bad deeds that you did with good. وَأَتْبِعِ السَّيِّئَةَ الْحَسَنَةَ تَمْحُهَا. Follow up the bad deed with a good deed, it will wipe it out. We did answer in more detail in one of the other Q&A sessions, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. What's the difference between nasiha, enjoining good, and forbidding evil? Are they one and the same? Nasiha isn't just advice. Nasiha means behaving in a way that is sincere towards the person, towards the other person. That's why you can have nasiha to the Qur'an. And behaving sincerely, acting in the interests of that person. That's nasiha, including advice. Enjoining good and forbidding evil is not just advice. It is about stopping people from doing wrong and making people do things that are right. Even if that means that there's a degree of force in it, if you have authority. Of course, if you don't have authority, you can't use the force. But if you have authority, it means enforcing that good is practiced and stopping, prohibiting evil from happening. And that is part of an-nusr, because that's part of sincerely wanting good for people. But the two are different in the sense that an-nusr or an-nasiha is very broad about wanting good for people and being sincere. And commanding good is about making sure that good is practiced and that evil isn't, according to the rules of the Sharia, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Please explain ayah number 125 from Surah Al-An'am. Okay, I have to bring up the surah because I don't memorize ayah numbers, usually. Unless it's a really, really famous ayah, I don't memorize ayah numbers. So, let's see, 125. فمن يريد الله أن يهديه يشرح صدره للإسلام ومن يريد أن يضله يجعل صدره ضيقا حرجا كأنما يصعد في السماء كذلك يجعل الله الرجس على الذين لا يؤمنون كذلك يجعل الله الرجس على الذين لا يؤمنون. Whoever Allah wants to guide, those that Allah Azza wa Jal has blessed with al-hidayah al-khasa, the specific, special guidance of Iman. And that guidance is not of one level. The special guidance of Allah is not of one level. So the guidance given to the Prophet ﷺ is not like the guidance given to you and me. And the guidance given to a very, very, very deeply committed, practicing person is different from the person who is being guided to Islam in general, but not to the tafasil of Iman, not to the individual actions of Iman in terms of practicing and commitment to the religion. So the one that Allah Azza wa Jal wants to guide with his special guidance of Iman, he opens up his chest to Islam and he makes Islam something which is beautiful to him, something which is which fits, something which feels comfortable and feels like he is able to practice it. And that sharh al-sadr, the expansion of the chest and the opening of the heart to Islam, from this is the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ حَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْإِيمَانَ وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ وَكَرَّهَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْكُفْرَ وَالْفُسُوقَ وَالْعِصْيَانَ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الرَّاشِدُونَ فَضْلًا مِنَ اللَّهِ وَنِعْمَةً وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ حَكِيمٌ. Allah, however, has made you love Iman and has beautified it for you in your hearts. And He's made you hate disobedience and disbelief and defiance. Those are the rightly guided, the ones who Iman is beloved to them and it's been made beautiful to their hearts. They are the rightly guided as a grace from Allah and a favor. And Allah is all knowing and all wise of where to bestow that favor and who to give it to. And whoever Allah wants to misguide, because misguidance is in the hands of Allah. He guides whoever He wants and He misguides whoever He wants. And He guides as a grace, out of grace and a favor, and He misguides out of justice and wisdom. He makes His chest dayyiqan, restricts it, constricts it, harajan. He feels like he can't bear this, and he doesn't tolerate this discussion of Islam, and he can't bear it. كَأَنَّمَا يَصَّعَّدُ فِي السَّمَاءِ, as though he's being propelled through the heavens. And that's why, you can imagine now, if you imagine a rocket taking off into space, you imagine the G-force on the astronaut and how much their chest is compressed down. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala compresses the chest of the person. The person doesn't want to accept Islam, doesn't look at Islam. Islam is not, they can't tolerate it, they can't bear it, they don't want to practice it, it's not easy for them. كَذَلِكَ يَجْعَلُ اللَّهُ الرِّجْسَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Like this, Allah Azza wa Jal puts a rijs. Like this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts His wrath upon those who do not believe. And that's a small discussion of the ayah. The ayah deserves no doubt more than that, but it's just a brief discussion on the ayah. How can women benefit the society? As you mentioned, Muslims should do this, and what are the differences in contrast to men? Is it wajib for Muslim women to be out there, or can we stay at home and leave it to the men? I've also mentioned this in a previous sitting, and again I'll just sort of emphasize and just kind of reiterate and just highlight a few points. So the first thing is men and women are different. Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنثَى. Male and female are not the same. And we should be celebrating those differences and benefiting and maximizing the benefit in those differences, not trying to erase them. So we shouldn't be trying to erase them, like Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ به بعضكم على بعض للرجال نصيب مما اكتسبوا وللنساء نصيب مما اكتسبن واسألوا الله من فضله إن الله كان بكل شيء عليما. Allah Azza wa Jal said, don't seek or don't crave over what Allah has preferred some of you with over others. Men will have a share of what they've earned, and women will have a share of what they've earned, and ask Allah from His grace. Allah is knowing of all things. So Allah tells us, don't crave and don't run after the things that have been given to men and not women, or women and not men. But ask Allah for His bounty and His grace to bless you in what He has given you. There's no doubt that the asl of the Muslim woman, the fundamental, the norm for the Muslim woman, the default for the Muslim woman is the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَقَرْنَ فِي بُيُوتِكُمْ. Remain in your home. That's the default. Without a shadow of doubt, it's the text of the Qur'an. It's not my opinion. وَقَرْنَ فِي بُيُوتِكُمْ. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, لَا تَمْنَعُوا نِسَاءَكُمُ الْمَسَاجِدِ وَبُيُوتُهُنَّ خَيْرٌ لَهُنَّ. Don't stop your women from going to the masjid, but their houses are better for them. أو كما قال. And the Prophet ﷺ was asked by a woman who said, O Messenger of Allah, I love to pray with you. He said, the prayer that you pray in your local, the masjid of your local area is better than the prayer that you pray with me, better than praying with the Prophet ﷺ. And the prayer that you pray in your courtyard is better than the prayer that you pray in your local masjid. And the prayer that you pray in your home is better than the prayer that you pray in your courtyard. And the prayer that you pray in your private room is better than the prayer that you pray in the rest of the home. For subhanallah, for you to pray in your room in a secluded space is better than praying with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For subhanallah, and that shows us without a shadow of a doubt that that is the default, that's the norm. And no one's saying that a woman can't go out of the house ever, and you're imprisoned in the house and you need to put bars on the door. No one's saying that, but that should be the norm, that should be the default. But there's so much you can do. And I said before, make your home a madrasa, where there graduates from that madrasa ulama, scholars, du'at ila al-khair, yani people who change the world, graduate from, by Allah's permission, graduate from this madrasa, which is this home. Make it a castle, make it yani, somewhere where the Qur'an is recited and the prayers are done and good is done for people and the poor are looked after and the guest is honored, and a place where good is commanded and evil is prohibited. We all talk about how we love to live with Islamic laws and we want Sharia law and all of that. Like, sometimes we don't even want to apply Sharia law in my bedroom, let alone apply it in the world or in my country. Sometimes, we say to the brothers, you talk about Sharia law and you want to apply it. Akhi, you can't even apply it to your face. Look at you, haliq al-lihya. Your face is, your beard is all cut. You couldn't even apply Sharia law to your face. How are you going to apply it to the country? And that's the reality. Some of us, our houses are places where we have every right to apply the laws of Allah and we don't do it. The TV is on, the music is playing, the people are doing all kinds of haram, there's all kinds of stuff on the phones. We don't even apply it in our own house. Subhanallah. So make your house a place where good is commanded and evil is repelled, and a place where there is so much good and people are studying Islam, and be the engine that drives that, because who else will be after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help and aid? Who is going to be the person to do that except that sister? And that's why we used to have before sisters who remained in their house. Not to say they couldn't go outside. They chose to remain in the house. And from that house, how many people that changed the whole world at that time. A'imma, any people of knowledge. And I honestly recommend you have a look at Al-Madrasatul Umariyah, the story of Al-Madrasatul Umariyah. It's on the AMAU, I think, YouTube channel, where we talked about some of the females, the sisters among the Maqdisiyin, the Maqdisi family who founded Al-Madrasatul Umariyah, and what they did. And they said that some of them, there was one of them, she was a reciter of the Qur'an. And you say in her classes, the house was so full in the women's class, there were women that were clinging onto the windows to listen to the class. But instead, in this day and age, we're just focused on men who want to be women and women who want to be men, and why can't I be a woman and why can't she be a man? And we lose the actual good that Allah has actually given us to do with what Allah has given you. Okay, if Allah hasn't given me money and wealth, should I sit all day at home saying, oh, if only I had wealth, I would do this. When I have wealth, I'm going to do this. Or should I just say, look, this is what Allah has given me. Bismillah, let's do the good that Allah has given me the chance to do. But instead, we spend so long just craving what other people have that we never actually use what Allah has given us. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Is Forex trading permissible? In terms of Forex, the system, I don't believe it's permissible, no. In terms of the idea of buying and selling currencies, there's no problem with that, with the conditions of the Prophet ﷺ that he gave, hand to hand in the place, equal for equal at the market price at that time, and hand for hand, and so on. But what is not allowed is all of the things are related to the Forex system, which includes betting on the outcomes of changes in currency and things like that. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. If I consider the niqab to be wajib, but I cannot wear it most of the time, do I get a sin? So the real key here is, what does cannot mean? If cannot means I am forced, I have no way that I can get out of it, then you don't earn a sin for what you're forced to do. However, a lot of people, for them, cannot means it would be hard for me. And that's where it becomes, possibly sinful, where a person says, I can't because people would look at me, or I can't because people would shout at me. That's not an excuse. But I can't because, it's illegal. I would be arrested. I would be thrown in prison. Yeah, then that is at the level where a person, does the best they can and fears Allah as much as they can. And maybe that means a hijab and a face mask, because these days the face masks are, everywhere. So, maybe it's a hijab and a face mask, if that's the most you can fear Allah Azza wa Jal, because, it's illegal in the country, it's not allowed, and so on. What are the guidelines for the beard? Is it allowed to trim the sides a bit? So the Prophet ﷺ used to leave his beard. He didn't used to trim it. He used to leave it, and he commanded leaving the beard, let the beard go. However, there are some things that are acceptable to do. From those is if the person occasionally, such as Hajj and Umrah, were to trim the beard to the length of a fist, then some of the Sahaba used to do that, radiyallahu anhum ajma'een. And likewise, if there's one long hair, or if there's a hair that's knotted or twisted and you brush it out, or you just trim it out, then there's no harm in that, inshaAllah ta'ala. An advice for a woman who struggles with regard to her tongue. How can she speak better to her husband? Not just to her husband, but to everyone. So I think the first thing, all of us, it's not just a woman. It's not about a woman here. It's about everybody. We all let the tongue go. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Kuffa alayka hada." hold this in check. كف عليك هذا. Hold this in check. Hold it, keep it in control. Silence it. And then Mu'adh, he said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, O Messenger of Allah, will we really be taken to account for what we say? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, may mother lose you, O Mu'adh, will anything else cause the people to be dragged into the hellfire on their faces except for the hasa'id, the harvest of what their tongues have earned. This is what causes people to be dragged into Jahannam. So to think about what you say before you say it. And imagine that there was in your mouth a rock. And imagine that every time you had to speak, you had to actually take the rock out of your mouth and then speak. And then put the rock back in. There's a big rock. I had to really take it out and put it back in. In that time, you have time to think, is this really worth taking the rock out of my mouth for? And also try to replace the sab, like the cursing or the shouting, with tasbih. You know, even that can be a criticism, but replace it with something religious. That's why Aisha radiallahu anha, the Prophet said that I know when you're angry with me. When you're happy with me, you say, Wa Rabbi Muhammad, by the Lord of Muhammad. And when you're upset with me, you say, Wa Rabbi Ibrahim, I swear by the Lord of Ibrahim. Did Aisha curse? No. Did she say a bad word? No. Did she shout? No. But she used to just use Islamic words. So when she was upset, she would say, I swear by the Lord of Ibrahim. And when she was happy with the Prophet ﷺ, she would say, I swear by the Lord of Muhammad. Sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Don't use these bad words and bad language, and instead use the likes of Subhanallah, may Allah correct us, may Allah forgive you, may Allah forgive us both. So, you know, these kind of words, instead of using this, you are this, you are that, and shouting. And also, one bit of advice, when you're upset with somebody, just do one thing. Sleep on it. Or give it a few hours. If you wake up in the morning and it's still important to you, maybe then you could, with hikmah and wisdom, discuss it. But actually, usually within a few minutes, it's not important to you, let alone the next day. So don't allow this to affect you and affect your akhirah and be something that causes you to be dragged into the hellfire. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. How to balance Qur'an lessons, Islamic studies in school. So the very first thing that I always advise people to do when we talk about balancing these things is, first of all, to say what is the minimum that I have to do. What is my base level? I have to do it. So I have to go to school. At the moment, I would love if I didn't have to go to school, but I have to go to school. And school has exams. I have to do an hour of homework a day. That's like, I can't do anything about that. So that's your, that is your minimum that you have to do. You have no choice about it. Now you look at, okay, what's the next step? Where can I fit in my Qur'an and Islamic studies to maximize the benefit? And here I would say, if you're a young person, particularly young children, let's say younger than the age of adulthood, then Qur'an should get the biggest share, definitely. And if you're an adult or you're a bit further down the line, then I think that still give the Qur'an that priority, but you'll have to put more of the Islamic studies in there as well. I have also answered this as well on some of the other previous questions as well, but just kind of a few basic points. So very, very young children, we want to heavily weight it in favor of the Qur'an, and in terms of Islamic studies, just what they need. And then when you get older, you memorize whatever you can from the Qur'an, because you won't be able to memorize. Let's say if I sat all day, I can memorize 3 pages. But if I sit there for 2 hours, I can memorize the same, or I sit there for 1 hour, I can memorize the same, or I sit there for 45 minutes, I can memorize the same, because my memory can't manage more than that. So I set it at 45 minutes and then maybe a 30-minute revision at the end of the day, and that's enough for me. And I can't really, even if I gave more time, I can't really do that much more. So I kind of optimize that, and then the rest goes for the Islamic studies, inshallah ta'ala. And the school commitments is just a necessity that is there. You can't do anything about it. But don't add more to it. Like, just take the minimum that you have. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Practical advice of things I can do to give a good picture of Islam. The first thing is to show your Muslim identity. Let yourself be seen as a Muslim. Because if people don't know you're a Muslim, then all the nice things you're doing don't get credited to Islam. Secondly, speak about Islam. Of course, speak with wisdom and speak appropriately, but speak about Islam. Have a general conversation. Be open. Just chat to people about Islam. Whether it's, what you're doing, and yeah, this is part of my religion, and I guess you noticed I go to pray, and yeah, people might ask you about the way you dress, the way you behave, or whatever. Just share as much as you can about Islam. And then focus on dealing with those people in the workplace in the best possible way, especially looking at all the ways they don't deal with you well. So maybe they lie, people backstab each other, there's office politics, they don't fulfill their amanat, they don't do the jobs they're told. You do all of those things. And you keep telling people that's because of Islam. I think that's one of the best ways you can do it, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. How do you do Qiyam al-Layl, and should it be short or should it be long? So Qiyam al-Layl can start any time from Isha until the Adhan of Fajr. So after Isha, any time until the Adhan of Fajr. However, the best time for it is the last third of the night. To know the last third of the night, take the time for Fajr Adhan and the time for Maghrib Adhan, and divide the time into 3 and pick the last third. The last third can be hard to start. So I think if you're going to start, maybe start with just after Isha. You prayed your Isha prayer, you prayed your Sunnah. Maybe when you go, just before you go to bed, you go home just before you go to bed, and you pray 2 by 2, meaning 2 raka'at, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and then 2, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and then 2, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum, and so on. There's no maximum or minimum number, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to pray 8 raka'at, and if you do that, that's very good. Make it as long as you can, but don't burden yourself with more than you can manage. Even 2 raka'at after Isha is still very good. Finish with witr, which is the 3 raka'at or 1 raka'ah, or there's some other variations in the Sunnah as well. Normally you pray as 2 raka'at followed by the salam, followed by 1, or 1 raka'ah by itself, and there are other variations in the Sunnah as well. If you're struggling with reading the Qur'an for a long time because you haven't memorized very much, you can hold the Mus'haf and read if you want to. What's the best advice you can give with regard to how we should raise our children in an Islamic way in Sweden? So that's a very powerful question. That's a very detailed question. I actually have a video on raising children called The Muslim Family. It's very old. If you look at the video, you'll be like, whoa, what is that? Video looks really strange because it's very, very old. It was probably 2020 that video was made, early 20, something like that, maybe 2020's kind of time, mid-year, I think. And that video was a video which talked extensively about raising children. But in brief, I will answer just a very, very brief, sort of a couple of points that will help you, inshallah ta'ala. The first thing which I'm going to advise you is that you learn the Islamic responsibilities of a parent, and you learn what Islam says about raising your children. Because without knowledge, how will you be able to practice it? Number 2, one of the two greatest things parents can do to influence their children is, number 1, control their education And no doubt homeschooling is by far the best if you're allowed to do it. And if not, really take care of their education, their Islamic education, and their their secular or worldly, I don't like the word secular, their worldly education. And if not, then, or in addition to that, to look at their group of friends. So we're talking about the child's education. If you can homeschool them, that's by far the best. If you're not allowed to homeschool them by law, you're not allowed to homeschool them, then to give them the best education they possibly can have. You're checking them when they come home from school, you're talking to them, you're getting rid of all the wrong ideas they're taught and putting in the right ideas about Islam. And then the group of friends they have and who they socialize with and who they're around with, that makes a really, really big difference. And then after that, the way that you raise your children goes into 3 phases. In the beginning, you play with your kids and you are there for them, you show them love, you show them affection and care. And then after that, you kind of discipline your kids, you teach them and you educate them and you show them what's right and wrong. And then after that, you be there for them, be a friend for them, be someone who's there for them, a companion who's there for them, even until the age of their adulthood and beyond. And we did a lot more in the video on Muslim children as part of the Muslim family course, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. If someone has hurt me and humiliated me, destroyed my honor in front of people I respect, am I allowed to ask Allah to keep them accountable on the Day of Judgment? What if I can't forgive them right now? No doubt, if you Allah will take everyone to account for what they did, in the sense that everyone will have to answer for the wrong that they did. And no doubt you're within your rights to ask Allah to hold them to account for it Yawm al-Qiyamah. But it would be better for you if you would find it in your heart to forgive them. وَلْيَعْفُوا وَلْيَصْفَحُوا أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. Forgive and overlook. Do you not want that Allah will forgive you? Far better for you is for you to find it in your heart to forgive that person. But you're not crossing a limit by asking Allah Azza wa Jal to hold them to account for it Yawm al-Qiyamah. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. I'm very passionate about seeking knowledge. I want to study abroad, perhaps Sharia. I'm a sister, my father allows it, but my mother is really against it. What do I do? Someone asked a similar question to Imam Malik. Different topic, but similar issue. He said, أطع أمك ولا تعصي أباك. He said, obey your mother and don't disobey your father, which is a nice answer. So you have to try to convince your mom and to show her. Of course, your father is the one who makes the decision at the end of the day. But you have 2 options. Convince your mom gently with beautiful explanation and wisdom, and then otherwise ask your father to tell your mum that that's what's going to happen. Because if your father goes to your mum and says, that's my decision, then that's it, that's the decision, that's the end of it. And otherwise it would be better to softly and gently explain. But whatever you do, if it's against your mum's wishes, and if your father allows you, and if your father has told your mother that she has to allow you, you have to disobey your mother in the best possible way, with the best possible manners, the most understanding and the most respect. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. If you and your husband don't believe the niqab is fard, there's a lot of believing about the niqab. I think more people have a belief about the niqab than anything else. They don't hold the niqab to be fard, but he wants you to wear it in a kafir land. What should I do? You should wear it. No doubt, because there's no issue there. The obedience to the husband is fard. Sah? Okay, even if you say niqab is sunnah, obedience to husband is fard, niqab for you is sunnah, you have to wear it. Because he didn't ask you to disobey Allah, he asked you to obey Allah. Who are the people Allah guides and who are the people Allah misguides? Allah guides the people of Iman. وَيَزِيدُ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ اهْتَدَوْا هُدًى. Allah gives an increase in guidance to those who are guided. And Allah misguides. وَيُضِلُّ اللَّهُ الظَّالِمِينَ. Allah misguides the oppressors, those who worship others besides Him. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Is it a good idea for me to sign up for AMAU if I'm new in knowledge and I don't know if I'll be able to keep up? I don't want to risk to pay and not be able to use it. Okay, what's your advice? AMAU has become a huge platform. By the grace of Allah Azza wa Jal alone, AMAU has become bigger than any of us could have imagined it becoming when we started the project. And indeed, I joined a little bit after the initial start of it. It's just become something that is huge, and it has so many different things that you can do. Programs for those who are new, programs for those who just want a little bit of content here and there, detailed programs, advanced level for student of knowledge, Arabic, English. It has so much there that I honestly believe you'll find what works for you. But someone who says, look, it's a paid program, and AMAU is a not-for-profit organization. Nobody makes a profit from it. It's a not-for-profit organization. Whatever profit is made is invested into the equipment, the dawa, the staff that run the program. So in that sense, it's not wasted. The money that's spent is not wasted at all. It's actually benefiting. If it's not benefiting you, it's definitely benefiting other people, that's for sure. But also, you're welcome to ask for a trial. Message the admin team. If it's not, I don't know if there's a trial available on the app now. I think there will be very soon available a trial option. But if not, just message the admin team. Say, I'm not sure if it's right for me. Can you give me a trial? And I'm sure they'll reply back to you, and they'll give you a little trial for you to be able to have a go and see how it works for you, inshallah ta'ala. So, don't let that... I personally, it would be lovely if we didn't have to charge for anything ever. It would just be amazing. But there are, a few things that really benefit. I think the first is that the people take things more seriously when they have to pay for them. And I'll tell you a statistic which you might be surprised about. And I think I'm allowed to tell you this. But sometimes I give away free access codes for various reasons. Someone got did really well in their studies, or someone did a big service to the AMAU team, and I give them an access code. And we can monitor how much people are engaged after they've been given an access code. So as we were saying, these people get some kind of access code, like they get themselves free, 6 months free or something like that. And we monitor it, and we see how they do. And actually universally, almost, not every single one, but almost all of them barely engage with the platform at all. They barely log in, they barely use it, they barely look at the classes, they don't do any study. And the simple reason is the incentive has gone away. So there is a benefit in it. But at the same time, there's a difficulty as well. So inshallah ta'ala, we try to find the best of both worlds. We try to make it a reasonable amount. It's not very, very high. It's very reasonable, very easy for people to do. And the admin team is always there to answer people's questions about it if they have things they need or specific circumstances that they want to discuss, inshallah ta'ala. So we move on to my last set of questions. There's 69 here, but I don't think I have to answer all of them because I think some of them I've already answered. So there could be maybe half or so, inshallah ta'ala. And again, we've got around half an hour till our Isha time here, and then inshallah after that we can also do a little bit more as well. So the hadith about women being the majority in the hellfire isn't the same applied in paradise. We don't have any hadith regarding that. And also, if it were just the case that women are more, like women are the majority of the hellfire because there's more women than men, and women are the majority of paradise because there's more women than men, the hadith wouldn't have any meaning. there wouldn't be a meaning to the hadith. Rather, the hadith specifically mentions the dangers of the sin of being ungrateful towards the husband, the danger of the sin of being ungrateful towards the husband and saying that I've never seen any good from you, as well as other sins that are any specific, or other issues that are specific to women, not always sins. So for that reason, the hadith indicates that it shouldn't be like that. It's like that, and it shouldn't be like it. It's not just because they're the majority of the people in the world or the population. So it doesn't seem to me that the same applies to paradise, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. What is a halal workplace? So a place where the job and the way that you do the job are permitted in Islam. So the job is permitted, the job you are doing is permitted. You're not working in riba, in selling what you don't own, in cheating people or lying or selling things that are haram or whatever. And the way you do it, the environment you are in, is in accordance with the Sharia. So it's not free mixing, and there's no haram going on in the environment itself. When is the right time to speak? وَمَنْ يُؤْتَ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. Whoever's been given hikmah has been given a great deal of good. There's no doubt that knowing the right time to speak is not an easy thing. But over time, a person learns from the Islamic texts, from the examples of the Prophet ﷺ, the companions, the biographies of the scholars. A person learns when to speak and when to be silent. And a person knows when it, not only from the laws of the Sharia, from the knowledge of Islam, a person knows, but also a person actually comes to learn from accompanying the scholars and the people of knowledge, to know when their speech will benefit and when it will harm. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. What are some of the routines that benefited you most with respect to implementing the characteristics of a man that are praiseworthy in the sight of Allah? Well, that's a very, very good question, especially it was related directly to the lecture. We talked about ar-rujula and the characteristics of a man. Some routines. There's a lot to think about. So each characteristic has its routines. So if a person, for example, is talking about let's say al-karam, generosity, that has its routines to strive, because at the end of the day, manners and etiquettes can be learned. إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ, and the hadith, إِنَّمَا الْحِلْمُ بِالتَّحَلُّمِ, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ وَإِنَّمَا الْحِلْمُ بِالتَّحَلُّمِ, أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. Knowledge comes from learning, and being forbearing comes from practicing being forbearing. So here, I want to be kareem. I want to be noble, and I want to be generous, and I want to be, that person who is known for their generosity in the sight of Allah, not in the sight of the people. How do I do that? I have to force myself to make the effort to be generous. I have to force myself to make that effort. And so I actually have to make an effort beyond what I would normally do. If I have something, try to share it. If I have something I like, try to give it away to someone. Try to invite more guests. I have to make an effort to actually try to be more. And so some of it is about identifying where you're weak. And that weakness could be that, for example, for some people, it could be the physical side, in the sense that, in terms of their let's say, spiritual characteristics are quite good, but they are, in terms of their sort of physical strength is weak, and they're not giving attention to it, and they're not giving it its right. So in that sense, it could be in terms of challenging yourself, improving your health, and working on your fitness and things like that, which is a part of rujul at the end of the day. It's a part of manliness and being a man. And that could be something that they do. So it could be they could have a routine for strength training, which is something that in their mind is because I want to work on that characteristic that I see myself to be deficient in. For me, the physical side and the strength and all of that is, the first thing is strength of iman. And without strength of iman, physical strength doesn't mean anything. But if you can have both, nurun ala nur, light upon light. But where I find things very useful, so I'll give you one routine that really I personally find is put yourself in challenging situations and analyze how you cope. Don't analyze how you cope when things are easy. Put yourself, if you want to be a leader, you want to be somebody who is a leader, an example for the people, and a leader of the people. You have to analyze how you behave in times of extreme stress. So I just give you an example. I remember I find myself stuck in a place. For whatever reason, I don't have any funds. I don't have access to them. That would be a better thing. I had funds, but I don't have access to any funds. I'm nowhere near home. My phone battery is gone, is dead. I don't have any way to communicate with anyone. And it's freezing cold. And I am literally stuck with, the clothes that are on my back. And I'm kind of like stranded. And the plan I had of transport got cancelled. So at this point, some people start to panic and some people don't. But even if you do start to panic, it's about saying to yourself, okay, I'm going to test myself. I'm supposed to be someone who teaches people about, about Islam and about, going back to the characteristics of the early generations. And this is a small thing. These people went to jihad, and I'm just worried about being stuck overnight somewhere without any way to contact people. So what can I do? So, okay, first of all, make dua to Allah. Second of all, let's make a plan and let's start. If my plan is to walk 40 miles overnight, that's what I'm going to do. Bismillah. So my first thought is, okay, I know what I can do. I can take a taxi and they'll ask me for payment at the end of the journey. And they'll take me to the place where I have the access to my funds, where my wallet is, so I can get it and I can pay for the taxi journey. I'll say to the taxi driver, just wait here, I'll go and get my wallet and I'll come back and pay for the taxi journey and then I'm back home. Alhamdulillah, that's my plan. Bismillah. Off I go with the taxi, upfront payment. Not one person is taken, no chance. We're not going to take you all the way that many miles. 40 miles, 50 miles, 60 miles. We're not going to take you all the way over there and you pay up front or you don't get in the car. Okay? No problem. Plan B, let me go find a phone charger because I had a phone with me at that time. Let's go find a mobile phone shop or a person, a staff member, something like that. I can borrow a phone charger. So I asked a couple of people. No one was given it. Fine. Thought, let me have a look and see. There's a phone shop, went through the nearby shopping areas, can't find one. It got late at night, all the shops are closed. So that's not going to work. Okay, what other options do I have? And the issue in the end, alhamdulillah, became easy. Allah Azza wa Jalla made it easy. But you evaluate, how did you behave in that situation? How did you cope? Not how you coped when everything was easy. Everyone copes when things are easy, generally. But how did you cope when things were really, really, really hard? And that was just an example. It wasn't that hard. Nothing that a couple of hours walking wouldn't have solved, inshallah. But it was, at the time, a stressful situation. I was a bit stressed about it. I was like, subhanallah, what a difficult situation to be in. But you ask yourself, how did I cope? How do I cope? How do I manage? And what can I do next time to be able to cope better? And it's not about next time I would, have a power bank for my phone. That's obvious. I'm talking about the way that you coped with it. Next time, let's just say your car tire popped in the middle of the road and you don't have a spare. You don't have a phone. You don't have any money on you. For example, if that happened, different scenario. How are you going to cope with that situation? Have you got that mentality of ask Allah for help? Ask Allah to make it easy. If necessary, pray. Sort yourself out. Take what you need. Bismillah, I'm going to start walking. That's what I've resolved to do. فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ, and put your trust in Allah. It's the way that you deal with the situation, not the situation itself. It could be any situation. Could be any situation. So how you deal with stressful situations, I think, is a nice routine to evaluate yourself in. Because people, sometimes you start snapping at people, you start being very rude, you start being very difficult, and you say, I'm stressed. But you're supposed to be able to handle those stressful situations. And you look at your weaknesses. If your weakness is, example, as we said, generosity, you look at working on that. If you feel that you're not, you're not a strong person with strong character, you don't have a lot of confidence. So again, you work on that. And it's such a beautiful question. There's so many things I could talk about, but I'm just trying to answer it quickly in the time that we have. But yeah, that's an example of one routine that I often ask myself. How do you behave when things go wrong? And how do you behave when you're extremely stressed? And sometimes the thing that stresses me the most is if I've got a lot of obligations to people. That's the thing. For me, you can, I can quite all day I can handle the whole car broke down in the middle of the night in a 500 kilometers from civilization. That for me is I'm all right. But what stresses me like crazy is obligations to people. So this person is stressing me. I came to you 2 weeks ago. You said to me you're going to do it. You didn't do it. And then there's another, and I get very, very stressed by that. So again, how did you handle it? Did you buy back at people? Did you deal with it? Did you give people their rights the best way that you could? It's very, very important. Next question is also related. What's the best way to deal with stress? Wallah, the best way I know to deal with stress is dhikr and salah. The Prophet ﷺ, when he was troubled by something, he would go to the salah. Pray 2 rak'at. Read the Qur'an. Take a breath. It works for me. I don't know if it works for you, but it works for me. Just take a breath. Remember Allah. Allahu Akbar. Subhanallah. Astaghfirullah. Go and pray. Read the Qur'an. Take another breath if you have to. And then do the best you can. Sometimes the reason we get super stressed is we have weak tawakkul in Allah. If you trust that Allah is going to help you, Allah is going to get you out of this situation that you're in, Allah is going to deliver you from this stress that you're in. So you just have to take the best option that's available to you. If I've got 10 deadlines and I can only do 3 of them, I just have to choose the 3 best deadlines and apologize and Bismillah, do the best I can. Some people say that women can't wear bright colored clothes as in terms of the hijab. There's no doubt that the hijab is there to divert the gaze and to repel the gaze. It's not there to encourage the gaze. So I don't know whether bright clothes are the problem, but the problem is attractive clothes. So, someone could be wearing a black abaya, but the black abaya has got beautiful designs on it and very attractive and a really nice cut and everything. So it's going to attract the gaze, not repel the gaze. So the hijab, the job is to repel the gaze, not to attract the gaze. So, I don't have a problem with it being dark blue or dark brown or something like that because, it's not attracting the gaze. But if you're in a place where everyone's wearing black and you're wearing dark brown, maybe you'll stand out. And again, bright colors, it all depends on the place you are, but yeah, I would discourage it, because ultimately it's going to attract the gaze and not repel the gaze. But there could be some situations where you're in a country where everyone is wearing those, those bright colors. I'm not sure about that, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. What is talaq? So there are 3 ways that a marriage can be annulled: al-talaq, and al-khul' and al-fasakh. So al-talaq is from the side of the husband, where the husband dissolves the marriage of his own accord, by his own choice. The khul' is where a woman requests for her husband to to dissolve the marriage, and it's either done with his agreement or it's enforced upon him by the qadi. The judge pushes him to do it. And if a husband agrees, he can just do it there for her. And the qadi is not a condition if the husband agrees, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. But if the husband doesn't agree, so now this is a khula', but the qadi is forcing the husband to give it in return for the mahar, usually. And the third is a fasakh, and that is a dissolving of the marriage, usually from the qadi, and that may not be because of the husband and wife, or it may be because of the wife's request or the husband's request, or it could be because of any different situation. The husband might have disappeared, but it's where the qadi dissolves the marriage of his own decision, and he makes a decision to dissolve the marriage. That's very basic, simplified. It's a lot more complicated, but that's just a very simple way of explaining it. Is it haram to mix with non-mahrams in school? No doubt. For different for boys and girls mixing in school, it's not allowed. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Can you clarify how the Prophet ﷺ is the ultimate form of perfect masculinity? And does that mean women cannot take from that? The Prophet ﷺ is an example for everyone. It's an example for men and women. But there are some things he did that were just for men. And that's where a woman can't take the example. So for example, al-jihad fi sabilillah was something the Prophet ﷺ did, but that's only for men, because the Prophet ﷺ was asked, Hal ala nisa'i jihad? Is there a jihad for women? He said that jihad is hajj and umrah. So therefore, there is that aspect of what the Prophet ﷺ did is just for men. But as for the things the Prophet ﷺ did that are for both men and women, like the prayer, they're an example for everybody. And if you read the seerah and the shama'il of the Prophet ﷺ, you see every single thing we spoke about what it means to be a man. The Prophet ﷺ fulfills that, and fulfills it in the most perfect way. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. There is for you in the Messenger of Allah the best example to follow, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. The hadith, a woman is married for 4 things. Why is wealth mentioned in regards to choosing a wife? It's a very good question. It's a very good question. And perhaps a man would marry a woman believing that if she's wealthy, one of 2 things would happen. Either she would not require so much from him, or she would gift him or help him and support him with her wealth. Like Khadija radiallahu anha helped the Prophet ﷺ with her wealth that she had. So a person might say, if she's wealthy, then either I don't have to spend so much on her because she already has a lot of money that she has for herself, or either she would support me with some of the money that she has. Perhaps that's the reason. Can a sister who doesn't have a mahram look for a spouse online in the best way possible? Yes, but I don't think she should give her own number. So when they do the profile matching, you put your profile, someone else puts a profile, no pictures and everything, and then there's a match, and it gives the mahram's number to the brother to call to go further. So when there's a match, I don't think she should give her own number, but she should give someone who is in a position of responsibility and trust in the community to do that, inshallah ta'ala. What is a real dayouth? So someone who is happy and the original meaning is that someone who is, let me explain it in a better way. Because originally we always say that it's someone who doesn't have protective jealousy for his wife. But the original meaning of it is الذي يرضى الفاحشة في أهله, the one who's happy for his wife to commit zina. That's the original meaning of the word. The one who is happy for his wife to commit zina. And then the word has a wider understanding than that. The one that doesn't have protective jealousy. And so he's happy for her to adorn herself in front of other men. He's happy for her to go out in front of them. He's happy for her to mix with them. Because this is all from those things which lead to a zina. So that's the original meaning of the word. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. So I'm not going to read this question out in full, but I want to give you context. Someone mentions something going on in a Muslim country and says, why are no scholars speaking about that? And it was regarding women's education. So I just totally disagree with this statement, no scholars are talking about it. When did you get an overview of what scholars are talking about? I'll be honest, what you mean is nothing came on my Instagram feed today. That's your idea of no scholars are talking about it. Rather, you don't go to the lessons or attend the mashayikh or know what they speak about. So that's the problem. People make these statements that why are no scholars speaking about it? But they actually have no idea what the scholars speak about. Because number one, they don't even speak Arabic, most people. They don't know what the scholars speak about. They only know what comes on their YouTube feed or the Instagram feed. That's all. That for them is the dunya wa ma fiha. And that's not accurate. The scholars speak about things at the right place and the right time. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. But the issue of Muslim women's education is an issue that is well known in Islam. Islam has never ever had a culture of preventing women from learning, especially learning their religion. That has never ever been a part of Islam. And whoever put that into Islam has lied against Islam. Lied against the Prophet ﷺ. To say that Islam prevents a woman from learning that which will benefit her in her deen, I don't know that this is a false statement against Islam. Like maybe when people talk about secular education or worldly education, I mean worldly education, men and women, you just take what you need to survive. And maybe people rebel against the Western system of education or whatever. But this issue of not educating our women, this is not from Islam. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Is a man feminine if he wants his wife to work? I think feminine is the wrong word, but if he wants his wife to work, I think he's not taking into account the rights and responsibilities of the husband and the wife. What's your opinion on a wife having a full-time job with children and without? So the ruling on women working is very simple. The first thing is that it's not the norm. It's not the default. The default is that the man should work and provide and take care of his family and their needs. The second is if she has to do that or if she wants to do that, then the conditions are as follows. Number one, that she has the permission of her guardian to do so, be it her husband or be it her father, depending on her situation, married or unmarried. Number two, that she's working in a halal environment. That means the job she does is halal and the environment she's in is also halal. And number three, that it doesn't interfere or harm her responsibilities that are being given her by Allah, including children and so on. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. How do you interact with the other gender in your everyday life without your wali? Is it permissible to talk about marriage in public without the wali. I guess that's like a meeting between potential husband and wife. No, it should be with the guardian. If there's no guardian, then let there be a responsible, older member of the community that people trust to be there, so that there can be no accusation against that man or woman leveled against them. So interaction should just be according to need. That's it. We talk about interacting between men and women according to need. You know, if I go into the bank, there's a lady behind the counter. You know, hi, I've come to pay this into my account. Okay, thank you. Put your card in the machine. Okay, anything else? That's all. Thank you. I don't need to, you know, ask for her phone number. I don't need to ask how she is. I don't need to talk about what her hobbies are. Just it's interaction like that. But when it comes to marriage, that conversation has to be chaperoned. And that chaperone conversation should be with the wali. And if not, because of he's not available or not, he's not in the country, or he passed away, or whatever it might be, then it should be with a responsible, trusted member of the community, like the imam of the masjid, or an older uncle, or someone that there can be no accusation made against that boy and girl because of that conversation that they're having, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. There's been a huge rise of extreme men who are against women, and some of them will use the religion in their favor. What do you have to say about this? Wallahi, Islam is never ever extreme. And honestly, this what I understand about this whole idea of this drive for extreme masculinity, this whole red pill movement and whatever, it's not being measured by Islam. And Islam has nothing to do with it, and it has nothing to do with Islam. It's not being measured according to Islam. It's not the Sharia. They're not talking about going back to being a man as defined by the Sharia. They're going to talk about be a man according to what they want, according to their desires. So the Sharia is not being involved in this. Rather, we need to scrap that whole thing and go to what Islam tells us a man should be and a woman should be. And I understand where this movement is coming out from. However, Islam is never ever extreme. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Like this, we have made you into a just and a balanced and a fair ummah. What do you say about the statement of the Prophet ﷺ? رِفْقًا بِالْقَوَارِيرِ أو كما قال, be gentle with the fragile vessels. خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِهِ. The best of you are those who are best to their wives. استوصوا بالنساء خيرا. Treat your women well. Where does the red pill movement have something to do with that? Rather, wallahi, these people don't know rujula. They don't know what manliness is at all. Instead, what they have is their desires only. And maybe there's something in the fitrah that says men are not being men, and then they're trying to change it themselves. Again, this is not what Islam says. Manliness and manlyhood is about being how the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba were. That's the gold standard for men, and it's the gold standard for women. And everything else after that is just wiswas al-shayateen, the whispering of the shaitan. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. We're going to take a break now for our Isha prayer, insha'Allah ta'ala, and bi'idhnillahi ta'ala we will resume after the break. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala abdillahi wa rasulih, Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Do men have an obligation to correct a woman's hijab? In general, yes, people have an obligation. A father towards his daughter, a brother towards his sister, and so on. As for if you see a woman who is foreign to you, she's not, you're not a mahram to her, and she has a problem with her hijab, which you realized, then if there's an appropriate way to do so, the difficulty is there sometimes might not be an appropriate way to do so, but if there's an appropriate way to do so, for example, there might be a mahram with her or something like that, and you can call the brother and say, if you don't mind it, sister, XYZ is the problem. But it could be a tricky one if it's not an appropriate situation. What advice would you give to Muslims living in the West? I'm going to give 4 pieces of advice, inshallah ta'ala. The first piece of advice that I'm going to give is ask yourself, why are you here? And I don't mean that in a really, I don't mean that in a horrible way. I don't mean that in a, that you're a terrible person. But really ask yourself, why am I here? What is the reason why I'm not living in a Muslim country? Is it because I have no choice? Is it because of my job or education? Is it because of da'wah? Is it because I've preferred the dunya over the deen? Be honest with yourself. Why am I here? Number 2, while you are here, learn the knowledge by which you can be protected by Allah's permission from the desires and from the confusion and misconceptions that are so widespread in these countries. Number 2, support in establishing the footprint of Islam in your country, including establishing the masajid and supporting them, Islamic centers and schools, dawah organizations, and whatever else Muslims need, like funeral services and whatever it is that the Muslim community needs to have a footprint in that country. Be a part of the good of establishing that. Number 4, and the final piece of advice. While you are here, command what is good and forbid what is evil to the best of your ability. And that includes calling people to Islam and sharing Islam with people. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Can you tell us what the ideal role of a wife in Islam is? That's quite a long topic. And again, I would direct you to the Muslim family videos. But ultimately, the role of the husband and the wife is to get closer to Allah by the role that they are taking. So the question really is, how do I get closer to Allah as a husband? How do I get closer to Allah as a wife? What is it about being a wife or a husband that would make someone closer to Allah? So that's about knowing what is required from you in that role, and knowing what the rights of the husband are and the rights of the wife are, and knowing what it is that Allah Azza wa Jal wants from you, because it's not about the husband and then there's a full stop. It's about pleasing Allah Azza wa Jal and getting near to Allah, and that requires knowledge. And that's why I would direct you to the Muslim family series, inshallah ta'ala. So I think that I've done that one already, but I'll just check it. The question, just go back a little bit. How to increase your hikmah, that was a question. So the answer to that was quite simple, that reading the books of the seerah and accompanying the people of knowledge. The man who wants to marry his wife, who wants his wife to contribute financially, if he's got a very good reason for that, that could be considered. But if not, then no, it's not correct. A good reason could be, for example, they live in a country where it's very, very expensive and it really does need 2 people to contribute to the running of the house, for example, or he's in a very difficult situation in this moment in time. Is it true that masculinity traits are more clearly mentioned in Islam than traits of femininity, like rujula? No, I don't think that's true. Rather, I think that Islam explains everything perfectly, and how to be a perfect man is explained, and how to be a perfect woman is also explained very clearly. Is it best to follow a madhhab? But however, I tell you where there could be, the previous question, where there could be an issue, is that a lot of the traits are shared. So when we talk about rujula, 70% of what we're going to talk about is applicable in some way to a Muslim woman. And so, because it's applicable in some way to a Muslim woman, like for example, strength or generosity or knowledge or wisdom. We talk about it that that's how men should be, but also there's an aspect of how women should be as well. So that could be also a reason why it feels unbalanced, because in femininity we're talking about the things that are only true for women. And probably what we should do is go over all the issues again, but in light of the Muslim, the Muslim woman. And Allah knows best. Is it best to follow a madhhab? The reality is that a lot of people don't really know what a madhhab is and why they should or shouldn't follow it. So first of all, a madhhab is like a curriculum by which a person can easily study fiqh and the related sciences. And it's a curriculum which it gathers together everything a person needs in that regard. And because it gathers together everything a person needs in that regard, it is extremely useful for people who are studying fiqh. As for the regular person, it's not so useful for them because at the end of the day, what is a regular day-to-day, Muslim going to do with a curriculum for studying fiqh? However, where it becomes useful is because the person kind of attributes themselves to that, it's more about their teacher. It's more about connecting them to their teacher. When it comes to the level of that, the average Muslim, the madhhab really is just about connecting you to your teacher. And in that regard, you just have to ask the person who's the most knowledgeable person you have access to. It could be also that the books of the madhhab are taught in a basic way to the, regular Muslims. So I'm not going to say it has no use for the average Muslim, but it's not as anywhere near as useful to the average Muslim as it is to the person of knowledge. And as for the average sort of Muslim, really, how do they even know that they're following their madhhab or within their madhhab, or how do they even know that they're following their madhhab correctly? In reality, they're just asking the most knowledgeable person they have access to. So there's no harm in it, but it's really at the level of an average Muslim, it's just about asking the most knowledgeable person you have access to is more important than the madhhab itself. Once you begin to study the madhhab, and in some countries they do teach the madhhab at a very general level, then it becomes, you start to benefit from the curriculum. But what's very important is to note that the Qur'an and Sunnah is what really matters and getting to it. And the madhhab is only a means to do that. And it's not the end goal, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. How do you reconcile between keeping the pants above the ankles and not folding clothes in the prayer? No doubt keeping them above the ankles has priority over not folding the clothes in the prayer, because keeping them above the ankles is leaving them below the ankles is a major sin, whereas folding the clothes in the prayer is a normal prohibition. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Are we allowed to tuck our t-shirt into our trousers or tie a hoodie around our waist to cover our awrah before the salah? I mean, first of all, you should be wearing clothes that are appropriate to pray in all the time. But if you find that's the only way that you can do it, and if you just came in and you're worried about your awrah showing and you tie something around your waist, can't say I've looked into it more. If as a man you don't want your wife to do something but she insists, how do you handle that? So here's where the very first thing is the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, فَعِظُهُنَّ. The very first thing that you do is to speak to her about it and to give her admonition. To say to her, subhanAllah, why are you doing that after I said to you not to do it? And to talk to her about it and to admonish her, to remind her to fear Allah and so on. To listen to her also about what she has to say about her reasons for it and so on. And that doesn't have a time limit. The ulama say this maw'idha, fa'idhuhunna. It doesn't have a time limit. It doesn't have an expiry date. Rather, it is just that you continue to admonish her and talk to her and to encourage her and until she realizes what you're saying, until she comes back to to listening to what you don't want her to do, but also to understand and get any necessary Islamic rulings, things that you don't understand or things that you're not sure if it's allowed or not. And then after that, there is a process. And from that process is the statement of Allah Azza wa Jalla, وَهْجُرُهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ. Abandon them in the bed. Some of the ulama said this means to turn your back to them. You lie on the side of the bed. You don't lie on the bed, you lie on the side. But you don't allow your children to know you're fighting. It's a very important point. Islamically, you don't allow your children to know you're fighting. You don't show to your children that dad's sleeping on the sofa or dad's sleeping in the car or whatever. You don't show that to your kids. So that nobody should know that there's a problem between husband and wife except them two. That's much easier to reconcile. As for if the mother-in-law knows, the sister-in-laws know, everybody knows, that's when you're going to have a real problem. And there's a process to follow, which is mentioned in the ayah. Can a wife refuse her husband to have a second wife, and can she put it in the marriage contract? We have to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted a man to marry more than one woman with certain conditions. فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. Allah Azza wa Jal said, marry whoever you want of women, 2, 3 or 4. وَكُلُّ شَرْطٍ لَيْسَ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ فَهُوَ بَاطِلٌ. Every condition not in agreement with the book of Allah is false. Although many of the ulama, no doubt, allowed this to be a condition of the contract, well, I don't see it to be a beneficial condition. And I don't see it to protect her anything, because what does that condition do apart from restrict that person and make life hard for them, and then what? Force him into haram, push him towards haram, or to divorce the woman and leave her by herself. Many of the ulama allowed it, but كل شرط ليس في كتاب الله فهو باطل. Every condition that's not in accordance with the book of Allah is falsehood. What does Islam say about a man expressing his emotions, for example, by crying? Is it a sign of weakness or sincerity? 100% is a sign of sincerity. Crying is not a sign of weakness unless it is crying instead of acting. That can be a sign of weakness, where a person cries but doesn't do anything, and that can be a sign of weakness. But crying is a part of masculinity. Wallahi, it is. The Prophet ﷺ used to cry until his beard was wet and the floor was wet. Abu Bakr used to cry and Umar used to cry, radiyallahu anhuma, the Sahaba, and they were the strongest of men and the bravest of men, and they used to cry. But crying is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of masculinity. But where it's a sign of weakness, wallahu alam, is when a person cries and doesn't do anything. Akhi, get up and do something. And you're just wallowing in your own misery. Like in crying, especially out of the fear of Allah Azza wa Jal, crying out of the fitrah, things that fitriyan cause you to cry, like losing a child. This is from masculinity. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Is it permissible for a man and a woman to use social media to get to know each other for marriage? So I think you have to qualify what that means. So if we're talking about chatting, should only be done with a chaperone. Like, it should be a chaperoned, a moderated chat, not a one where they're chatting freely. But perhaps there could be a discussion with the wali there. Maybe that discussion would be better over WhatsApp than another, or whatever, because the person might be in another country, or it's not possible for them to meet in person. There's no harm in that, inshallah ta'ala, with the wali's permission and the wali being a moderator for that. Or if you mean by using social media, like to find out about the husband from his social media feed, there's no harm in that, inshallah ta'ala. Is it allowed to have eyelash extensions on while doing wudu? It's not allowed to have eyelash extensions to begin with, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Can a woman wear baggy jeans instead of an abaya? No, it doesn't replace the abaya. How does a woman in the West navigate through the struggles of tabarruj? That's a very, very good question. I like that question a lot. It is very difficult when society, not just in the West, but when society pressurizes you to adorn yourself, display yourself. Society tells you that you're free. Society tells you that this is how a woman should be. You shouldn't be oppressed. Very, very hard. And that's why you have to remember who you're doing it for. You're doing it for Allah. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ سَيَجْعَلُ لَهُمُ الرَّحْمَنُ وُدًّا. Indeed, those who believe and do good deeds, Allah will place love for them on the earth. ثُمَّ يُوضَعُ لَهُ الْقَبُولُ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Then acceptance will be placed for that person on the earth. If you go to make people happy, wallah, you'll never make them happy. And ultimately, we've said before, a woman who wears a full hijab and a woman who dresses up to go out, which one of them is free? Honestly, I ask you this question. Billahi alaykum. I ask you by Allah, which one of them is free? The one who dresses because of the pressure from society to please the people that look at her so that men can, have a good look. She can be eye candy for the men to walk past, so that she feels good about herself. Or the woman who says, I don't want to do any of that. I want to please my Lord. And I want to do what makes my Lord happy, and I don't care what any of you think. So which one of them is free? Wallahi, هربوا من الرق الذي خلقوا له فبلوا برق النفس والشيطان. They ran away from the slavery they were created for, and they became slaves to their own souls and slaves to the shaitan. So what a terrible situation to be a slave to the shaitan and a slave to other men and a slave to your own desires. Rather you be a slave to Allah, and then you'll be free. Remind yourself of that, and you wear what will please Allah. Don't wear what will please anybody else. You wear what will please Allah. And if you do that, Allah will make people accept you. ثُمَّ يُوضَعُ لَهُ الْقَبُولُ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Allah will make it so that people will accept you. Even if it takes a while. To test you for that process to happen. But in the end, Allah Azza wa Jal will put acceptance for you. And you will feel so free and so able to, and you'll feel a sense of being like light, like this burden is lifted from me. Because I'm pleasing Allah, and let the people do what they want. And don't be influenced by the peer pressure. Sometimes the worst doesn't come from the non-Muslims. I'm going to be honest with you. Wallahi, sometimes the worst actually comes from the worst situation. At times actually comes from the Muslims themselves. You got Muslim families, the father is saying, we talk about men oppressing women, forcing them to wear the hijab. My experience is the opposite. Many women wear the hijab against the wishes of their father. And sometimes even worse than that, against the wishes of their husband. Their husband says, don't wear the hijab. I want you to go out. I married you for you to wear the hijab, for you to be covered. I want the men to see what I have. This is the dayouth. The one that has no shame. Like he's pressuring her, don't wear the hijab. And she wants to wear it. So this peer pressure sometimes is worse from the Muslims. Some of the other Muslim girls, why are you wearing this for? Why are you being extreme for? What, Islam doesn't tell you to do this. Just, wear. And that's the thing, these hijab tutorials and Muslim influences, wallah, they're causing a great corruption on the earth. Wallahi, they are. And if they don't recognize the corruption they're causing on the earth today, wallahi, they will recognize it yawm al-qiyamah. And Allah Azza wa Jal will not let this dhulm go. Telling these Muslim women to wear makeup and wear the makeup that looks good with your hijab, and this is how to wear your hijab to look good. The whole purpose of the hijab is to divert the gaze and to take people away from that which is harmful to them. ذَلِكَ أَدْنَا يُعْرَفْنَ فَلَا يُؤْذَيْنَ. That's what it's about. For them to be known as a Muslim woman and not to be harmed. For this peer pressure is difficult. But the love of Allah Azza wa Jal and dedication to what pleases Allah will get you through it bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, by Allah's permission. Is it halal to be paid to do da'wah? So I think by da'wah, what we understand by da'wah here is the general sort of Islamic activities. So it can be permissible. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna ahaqqa ma akhadhtum alayhi al-ajr kitab Allah." The most deserving thing you've ever taken a wage for is the Book of Allah. But it shouldn't be the primary goal and the motivator behind the action at all. Rather, it should be that my motivator is to teach people, to share good, to please Allah, to remove ignorance from myself and others. And this is just a means to be able to do it. And something that's been facilitated by the grace of Allah, and then by the efforts of some of the volunteers and so on, to be able to support that to happen. But otherwise, the goal is to share the good, and getting paid is a benefit, a bonus, which helps, but it's not the goal and it's not the concern. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. How do we, in the future, help our kids to be saved from this phenomenon of mixing genders so they don't get confused? Should we homeschool them? For sure, homeschooling, I'm a big fan of homeschooling. I think you should always homeschool your kids if it's possible. In any, regardless of the gender issues and whatever, I really believe you should homeschool your kids. It's really, really good for them. And it's a beautiful thing to do. I have some videos on it as well. You can search Muhammad Tim Homeschooling, inshallah. And I think I have one on AMAU's app on the self-development portal. The way that you protect children is from two things: shahawat and shubuhat, confusion and desires. So desires is where someone knows that something's wrong, but they want to do it because it feels good, or they think they're going to be rewarded for it in some way. And the way you protect people from, and the issue of misconceptions is where people get confused about what's right and wrong. So conceptions, you respond with knowledge. I mean, your kids come home, you talk to them, they say that, they're saying to us that, for example, love should not be a crime. That's what they say, right? But Islamically, that's got nothing to do with LGBTQ. And Islamically, the whole principle that love should not be a crime is not accepted from the beginning. Forget about the LGBTQURESTUVWXYZ. All of that is a different thing. Now the question is, in the beginning, does Islam allow you to have a relationship with anyone that you want? It doesn't. We're not talking about men and women. We're talking about the principle itself. It doesn't accept that principle in the first place. There's so many times that love is a crime. And love is a crime when you have love for someone with the love that is only for Allah, it's a crime. And when you have love for someone, a passion for someone, a relationship with someone outside of marriage, it's a crime. For the whole idea in Islam, that the whole shubha, that how can you make love a crime, in the first place is batil, is is batila min al-asli. It doesn't have any foundation to it in Islam. So we don't even need to go into the LGBTQRESTUVWXYZ issues. We don't have to go into any of those things. Because the whole principle they're bringing, the shubha they're bringing with knowledge, you can pull it apart in a second. You see, Islam did not give freedom to have a relationship with whoever you want. It didn't give a freedom to have a heterosexual relationship with whoever you want, a man and a woman. It didn't give them freedom. So how is it going to give a man and a man freedom to have a relationship with whoever they want? It didn't give that to a man and a woman. For that's consistent in Islam. And actually, it's inconsistent. The counter argument is inconsistent. But in Islam, that argument is very consistent. That Islam has told you the kind of relationships you're allowed to have, and that relationship is limited to the relationship of a man and a woman in a permissible marriage. That excludes all kinds of things. So, shubahat, you deal with them. People say some people are born like that. For example, some people are born, feeling that they are a man or feeling that they're a girl or a boy, in opposite to their physical characteristics. So again, that's a shubha, right? It's a confusion people are putting in. So we say, first of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused people to be born upon the fitrah. مَا مِن مَوْلُودٍ إِلَّا يُولَدُ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ. There is no child except they're born naturally. فَأَبَوَاهُ يُهَوِّدَانِهِ أَوْ يُنَصِّرَانِهِ أَوْ يُمَجِّسَانِهِ. His parents turn him into a Jew or a Christian or a Zoroastrian. So children are born naturally. Children are born naturally. But there's no doubt that children are born, and sometimes children go through phases in their life where they feel different about themselves. That didn't happen last year or 10 years ago. That's been happening since, wallahu alam, probably since walad Adam, the children of Adam. That you have children who go through phases where they feel differently about themselves, where they feel confused about who they are, where they're searching for identity. That is something which children go through. The question now is, even if we say, for the sake of argument, this boy who is born physically as scientifically, medically as a boy, feels like he's a girl. Okay, just for the sake of argument, that's not created by society. For the sake of argument, society hasn't told him that, his friends haven't told him that, he feels like that. Islamically, are you blamed for how you feel? Are you blamed for how you were born? You're not blamed for that. What are you blamed for? What you do, your actions. And your actions and my actions are not free. This is the whole argument. It's not about gender equality. It's not about gender fluidity. It's not about 72 genders. It's nothing to do with that. It's about, are you and I free to choose to do whatever we want? Can I choose today to change myself from a male to a female in terms of my identity? I'm not talking about biologically, my identity. The West would say, yeah, why not? You're free. Islam says you're not free in the first place. You're not free to choose how to pray. You're not free to choose what you spend your money upon. You're not free to choose your gender identity. You're not free to choose anything because you're a Muslim. And the word Muslim means al-istislamu lillah wal-inqiyadu lahu bit-ta'a. It means complete submission to Allah and total obedience of Him. That's the opposite of being free. That's what servitude is. وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. The servants of the Most Merciful who walk upon the earth with humility, they choose to be in servitude to Allah. So I don't have a choice. My choice is what Allah Azza wa Jal chose for me. And Allah did not allow me to change the gender I identify myself with. The Prophet ﷺ cursed the men that resemble women and the women that resemble men. And Allah said, وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنثَى, the male is not like the female. Allah did not give me the ability to change. Therefore, it doesn't matter what a person is born with or feels like or what phase they go through in their life. Allah didn't give me the ability, and I'm a servant of Allah who has to do what Allah told me to do. So the argument they try to make it that you're oppressing, you're discriminating. Islam is consistent. It's the West that's inconsistent. It's the West that's totally inconsistent. Wallahi, the amount of times these people clamp down on Islam. So let me just put it to you this way. As I understand, in many of the countries we're speaking about, the niqab is not allowed in certain situations. The internship, the certain jobs, certain things, the niqab is not allowed. But you can change your gender. Just explain that one to me again. The niqab is banned, but you can change your gender. So you can't choose to cover your face, but you can choose to be a woman tomorrow instead of a man, or a man instead of a woman. What's that? How is that consistent? Either you give me freedom or either you don't. The reality is that you don't give me freedom. The freedom is to do whatever you want me to do, but whenever I want to do what I want to do, I don't have freedom to do it. You're oppressing these people, you're discriminating against them, but you're not giving me freedom to do what I want, what my religion tells me to do. So this whole idea of freedom is something which is just a mirage. It's just desires. Let's not call it freedom, let's call it desires. That's what it is. Hawa. It's not freedom. So challenging these issues with kids, and in an age-appropriate way, and talking to them and saying, you're allowed to go through phases where you don't know what you are, and you're allowed to be a bit confused, and you're allowed to be a bit, find yourself, and that people go through that. And it's also okay for you to have characteristics that are maybe considered to be associated with, let's say, another gender, for example. Like, for example, to be soft-hearted or whatever it is, or, and then people, the minute, for example, I feel like it's now this militant LGBTQ movement that is as extreme as any of these other extremist movements. And it belongs with them. It's an absolute extreme movement. We will convert you, or you will. You're gone. That's the reality of that movement. It doesn't tolerate anyone to have a different opinion. It doesn't tolerate any dissent. It doesn't tolerate anyone to raise a point of an academic point or a point of knowledge. It doesn't allow it. It doesn't tolerate any dissent at all. And fair enough, you can say Islam doesn't tolerate dissent. No problem. Because Islam is about submitting to the will of Allah. I don't have a problem with that. And this is to call it freedom. Freedom is the problem I have. Don't call it freedom. It's one of the most extreme, most enforced ideologies. You've got a young guy, he's in a mixed school. He's got friends who are girls, but he's not got a girlfriend. Straight away, he's gay. He's gay. Why? I mean, I'm not saying he should be in that school to begin with, but it's being enforced on people. You think what you want. You want to have 72 genders. Have 700. Have 700. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. You have as many as you want. You have 7,000. But why do you want to enforce your belief upon me and my kids? That's what I want to know. It's a very extreme movement. And that's why protecting our children, in reality, is about challenging the misconceptions in a positive way, in a way with hikmah, because obviously if you go too far, they, like I said, they don't tolerate dissent. They don't tolerate you to have a different opinion. And it's also about if they go through phases where they feel a certain way, or they feel like, I want to dress up like a boy, I want to be a boy. Well, like 20 years ago, if a kid said, I want to be a boy, if a girl said, I want to be a boy, we called her a tomboy, and, she kicked a football around outside, and khalas, like it wasn't what it is today. It's so politically charged today. It's so politically charged. Like, if people go through that phase, address it, and you remind them that we as Muslims don't have a choice. Our choice is what Allah chose for us, and that's it. وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَمْرًا أَنْ يَكُونَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَرَةُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِمْ. It's not for a believing man or a believing woman. If Allah and His Messenger decree a matter, they should have any say in it at all. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. What to do concerning jobs? Nowadays, almost every job is free mixing. I think, honestly, what you should do is plan your job very carefully, and plan for, if you can't get perfection, plan for as close to it as possible. So if you can't get, for example, what industry you're going to work in. If you're going to work in medicine, that you're going to have regular, frequent interactions between men and women, all kinds of interactions. That's reality. Okay, there may be one or two jobs that you don't, but a lot of the jobs you're going to do in medicine, you're going to have those interactions. Whereas other disciplines could be less, could be different. Take a job that's mostly working from home. A lot of work from home opportunities in IT and things like that. You've got to plan your job and then try to find the best solution that is the minimum amount of harm and the most amount of good. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Are there situations in which shyness is not the solution and isn't the best thing to do? Yes. Shyness, if it stops you from seeking beneficial knowledge, or shyness which causes you to do haram or to leave off a wajib. So these are 3 examples. Shyness which causes you to do haram. I'm too shy to pray. Shyness which causes you to leave off any wajib, like too shy to pray, or shyness causes you to do haram, that I wanted to say no to my friend when they told me to do this haram, but I couldn't. I was too embarrassed to say no. And likewise, shyness that stops you from seeking beneficial knowledge. I was too shy to ask. I didn't understand, but I was too shy to ask. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Would you say if a woman has skills like fixing the sink, it makes her masculine? I don't know. I don't think that's true. If she can fix the sink, mashallah, tabarak ar-Rahman. I don't see, this is like, it's not, we're not judging by the Western standards of what men and women do. We're judging by we're judging by Islam and what the Prophet ﷺ did. So if a woman is able to fix something around the house, may Allah bless her if she does that. Like, is it her job? If something goes wrong in the house, is it her job to fix it? Yeah, we could maybe say it's outside of her job description. Yeah, she doesn't need to do it if she doesn't want to. What about if she's the breadwinner because she has to? Yeah, it's no problem with that. Just let her make it be in a halal environment. And many people, single moms, people in difficulty, widows, people whose husband is not able to work, is sick, for example, no doubt. And, she doesn't have, kids who are able to do that for her. No, there's no doubt. Nothing wrong with that. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. As a young person, how do I balance my deen and my dunya? We have a video for that. Balancing the deen and the dunya. So you can watch the video, inshallah ta'ala. A lot of these we answered. Is it okay in a household for the woman to be the only one with a job and the man doesn't have one? So if there's a reason for that, and that's what they've agreed upon for a reason, then that could be acceptable if her job is permissible and they've agreed on that. However, it's not the norm. And it does create problems in the marriage. Of course it does. You know, what did Allah Azza wa Jal say? الرجال قوام. Allah Azza wa Jal said, الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. Men have a degree of responsibility over women because of what Allah has preferred some of them with over others and because of what they spend out of their wealth. So if you don't spend out of your wealth, what's going to go away? Some of that qawwama, that authority, is going to be taken away from you. The reality is it causes problems in the marriage, 100%. I've brothers, sisters come complaining to marriage counseling, complaining that, you know, we're fighting and she doesn't listen to me and he doesn't pull his weight, and you know, in the beginning they agreed she would work and he would stay at home, and you know, it's not, Islam doesn't have a problem with a husband and wife agreeing on a solution that doesn't break the rules of Islam. But sometimes when you go against the fitrah in something, you do reap the consequences of it in the marriage itself. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Is a man marriage potential if he isn't protective and doesn't have ghira? Or doesn't have ghira, okay. If a man is, I guess a man like that could be divided into two. A man who is ghafil, he doesn't pay attention. And a man who really doesn't care. The man who really doesn't care about his wife and doesn't look after her, doesn't have protective jealousy, this man should not be a marriage proposal or potential. But a man who is maybe just ghafil, he does, but he just doesn't, he sometimes just takes his eye off the ball, he doesn't quite concentrate at times, then maybe this could be forgiven and the person could be encouraged to make changes, inshallah. Why is Islam against talks about feminism and masculinity? So the strange thing about this question is that Islam is only against what Allah said it's against, and what the Prophet ﷺ said it's against, and what the Ummah came together upon it, you know, that it's against. What Muslims do today doesn't represent Islam. So, I mean, it mentions feminism. Feminism isn't one of those isms. And it needs explaining. It has different levels: first wave feminism, second wave feminism, third wave feminism. What is feminism all about? What were the goals of each one? And some of those goals might be Islamic goals at some point. Wallah, I believe that. And if you're talking about treating a woman fairly and having the right, for example, to own her own property and the right to be like a free woman with choices, that's an Islamic goal. And that might have been a goal in first wave feminism, because the West was oppressing women for, and still is oppressing women, but was oppressing women for, you know, all these hundreds of years. And so no doubt some of the goals of early feminism would have been compatible with the Sharia and others wouldn't. After that, it became something else. And it became sometimes about oppressing men. And it became sometimes about behaving like men. And I don't think that that is true to what feminism was in the beginning, from my understanding. I don't think that's true to what feminism was when it started. That feminism started off like that, I don't think it did. I think that this is maybe present in some feminists, early feminists, but it was not. I don't think that it was what the movement was all about in the beginning. I think that came about because of the way the corruption within the society. But ultimately, these isms, it doesn't matter, feminism, red pill, whatever you want to talk about, all of this is not Sharia. It's not Islam. It's not قال Allah wa قال Rasul wa قال Sahaba. That's what we want. Allah said, the Messenger said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and what did the Sahaba agree upon? That's what we want. That's what we want. And all these isms, it doesn't really concern us. As for talks about it, we don't mind having talks about it. No? Talk about anything, inshallah ta'ala, within reason, but within Islamic context, and not within the context of those isms pushing and promoting their own views to us. Then I'm not really interested. I don't want to attend, or I'm not really concerned to listen. But I'm more than happy to speak if people want to listen about what Islam says about it. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Okay. I think that brings us, insha'Allah ta'ala, to the end of these questions. Now you can see there were themes. There was a hadith theme, there was a feminism theme, there was a masculinity theme, there was different types, because the lectures were on different topics. And I tried my best to answer as many of the outstanding questions as I could. There were one or two that I left because I thought it wouldn't work. There were one or two that I left because I didn't have time, or I thought I'd answered them already. This was all part of the AMAU tour that happened in Sweden and Denmark. And AMAU, we love doing these tours. Really, they are very, very beneficial. And the idea is just to get out there and see people, because AMAU is an online academy primarily. And so we tend to just see a camera. And generally, the only thing I see in front of me is a camera. And it's nice to actually come out and see people in person, and to actually be able to deliver some classes, and for people to be able to interact and give us feedback, and for us to learn from them as well. And that, alhamdulillah, was one of the tours that we did. Every class had so many questions. I promised I would try to take them as an online Q&A, and that's what we did. And that's what Allah Azza wa Jalla made easy for me to mention. Now I must say one thing. I answered to the best of my ability, and I tried my best not to answer something that I didn't have knowledge of. And I tried my best to speak in accordance with the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to the best of my ability. Whatever I got right from that is the grace of Allah and His blessing. And whatever I got wrong, and I spoke wrongly, or I said something wrong about Islam, or something incorrect, or I misspoke or misquoted something, then that is my own mistake. And Islam has nothing to do with that. That is what Allah Azza wa Jalla made easy for me to mention. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Wassalatu wassalam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.